And that's an interesting thing because a lot of people want to use AI, which is great. However, obviously understanding what you're doing with your data and who you're sharing it with is actually very important because
Hey everyone, I am very excited to have Doug Merrett with us. Doug is the founder and principal architect at Platinum 7, and I've known Doug for a long time. He used to be at Salesforce alongside me, and he's an extremely sharp Salesforce architect who specializes in data security. Doug's firm Platinum 7 does a lot of security assessment and overview of security configuration for Salesforce orgs all around the world. And I'm so glad that Doug is one of the presenters on Enterprise Dreaming, and he's talking about security when it comes to Salesforce plus AI. So Doug, welcome. And I'm very curious what our audience are going to learn in your session.
Thanks, Saurabh. I'm really looking forward to attending Enterprise Dreaming. It should be an excellent event. A lot of great speakers involved. And in our session, we're going to be talking about security with AI. And that's an interesting thing because a lot of people want to use AI, which is great. However, obviously understanding what you're doing with your data and who you're sharing it with is actually very important because we've seen a couple of issues in the past where people have shared intellectual property with the AI vendor, and that is now with the AI vendor forever, and that's not a great thing. You've leaked your IP, it's not good. So a very important part of this actually is putting a security layer inside your AI prompts to make sure that you're not sending any intellectual property or PII across to the actual AI tool itself. Very important. And I think actually, Saurabh, you've got something like that in your GPT integration tool, GPTify.
True, Doug. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think I like to say that security is the sword on which AI will die. I think across the board, every customer I've spoken to, whether in US, Europe, Australia, elsewhere, security is paramount for them. And everyone is actually quite worried about it, especially with AI, given how new it is in every executive's radar. I think in addition to security, I know we talked about earlier, like data residency is also a significant concern, particularly in countries like Australia, where data residency is a very important legal consideration.
Definitely with some data, that is definitely true. Not all data needs to be resident in Australia, but some data definitely does. But the configuration to limit them, so they can't just ask random questions of the tool, they should be doing things that you've set up in your Salesforce environment, things like summarize this case for me and these types of things. So these prompts, as they're called, you should be able to allocate them to different users depending upon what profile they're in, what permission set you want to give them. That because the actual not only security layer of the data itself, but also limiting who gets access to ask which questions of AI is quite important. Because you don't want people just putting random text in. Obviously, some people who've got skills and you give them that permission, that's great. But generally, the normal users should just be given a button that says, do this, do this, do this. And that data is then passed across to the AI and it comes back with a response, which then can be put back into the system.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that point up because there is a lot of considerations around that from an admin perspective. It's not any different from how we treat data, right? What a Salesforce user can see and do inside Salesforce is extremely granularly controlled today with a wide variety of controls. Salesforce is such an excellent platform when it comes to these kind of granular security controls. And when it comes to AI, that is the new frontier and the same challenge exists there. How do we ensure that certain users, certain profiles, certain objects, certain record types, you only have a limited ability. You can only use pre-configured prompts. And for others, you may have power users who can just literally type in a prompt and ask a question of AI and get back a different kind of response. We've spent a lot of time building products around in GPT-5, building features which actually address problems like this, because this is like really high on a lot of customers' list. Doug, in your experience, are there other areas around integration and things like that, since we are potentially integrating with an AI?
Oh, definitely. When you start looking at integrating with any external system, be it your back office SAP environment or your HR environment, you need to have good API security. And so understanding what the other end can actually do is very important. You don't want to be sending this information across the open internet. So it's got to be encrypted in some way, which is pretty much now ubiquitous. but also what are the credentials going to be used for this AI connection, and how are you going to keep them? Because out there at the moment where people are stealing credentials from developers and actually using their AI license and actually running up huge bills. So making sure you protect your API access and put your details into a secure area to make sure that only when you're allowed to do something, it actually will be done via the API itself. So regular standard security stuff around API itself, but name credentials, these types of things are actually quite important to make sure you control access to this API very strongly.
That is such an excellent point. And it is twofold. Like what we have seen with some of our pilot customers is they are building, they want control inside Salesforce, which of course we do at GPT-5 as well. Salesforce offers you those kind of standard capabilities with named credentials, external credentials, associating an API only profile, things like that, right? So you're securing it on the Salesforce side, but also to your point that someone can steal those API keys in secret and run up a huge bill. Even on the API provider side, it is vital to be able to control those things. So we know that like Azure and OpenAI and some of these other, providers where you can get access to LLMs are actually, they have built that kind of functionality where you can limit what's the top end of the bill that someone can run. But I think there is a lot more that will need to happen in this space.
Oh, definitely. It's a very new technology. And as every new technology, normally the security part of it's a little bit dodgy at the first part, but then it's getting stronger and stronger over time. So the point is people want to get out there and actually make some money out of this stuff. Obviously, they are releasing things a little bit early, but then they come along afterwards and really tie it down tightly. Like the integration tool for AI, where actually you can connect to your own AI and that type of thing. That makes it a little bit more secure because obviously you're in control of the AI, your endpoint, et cetera, et cetera. So that makes it much more palatable, I think, for a lot of big enterprises, and that's a great thing to happen.
Absolutely. I think it's a really great point. I'm very eagerly looking forward to this session. And I think between what you're going to talk about and the other aspect, which is all around security on the AI and the LLM front, I know Vernon Keenan is going to talk a lot about that in terms of toxicity, hallucination, in terms of, just security within the AI layer and all the other considerations there. I think between you and him, this is going to be such an excellent session that brings a very balanced and seasoned perspective, both on the Salesforce security as well as on the AI security, regardless of how customers build these solutions or buy it from whichever vendor.
Totally agree, Saurabh. I think it's going to be an amazing session. Vernon knows a lot about this sort of stuff, and I'm learning a little bit about AI as well as I go along, and things like hallucinations, toxicity, things like bias. These sort of things actually a lot of things you've got to be very careful of, because otherwise the answers you get aren't going to be what the answers you expect. So Vernon's going to cover that off. I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from him as well.
Right. Likewise. Thank you so much, Doug.
You're very welcome.
Well, looking forward to it and hope you all get a chance to join us in the session. It's on the 23rd of August, and see you there. Check out for more details on enterprisedreamin.org. Thank you so much.